Good morning and welcome back to the Professor and the CEO. I'm Ben Gillam, CEO of Third Way. And just a reminder why Rachel and I are doing these webinars is that in this time of crisis, we felt that often businesses and the academic world don't speak and don't communicate with each other. And there's so many lessons that can be learned from the past, so many great examples, so many great data sets that businesses can tap into and great minds to tap into as well to help navigate the crisis. And I'm a great advocate of it. It's been wonderful for me having Rachel to call upon. And that's why we decided to do these webinars. Rachel?
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Dorn and I'm a senior lecturer in entrepreneurship, and my research relates to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in times of crisis, and I tend to focus on areas relating to crisis management and resilience. So to begin, one of the biggest challenges that we all face at the moment during the current COVID-19 pandemic is this high level of uncertainty and volatility in the environment and how best to make decisions in this context. So it's really hard for all of us to visualize what's going to happen next. So what's going to happen over the next few weeks or months, and of course over the next year or two. And uncertainty tends to really exist, not to oversimplify, but it tends to exist when the amount of information we need and the amount of information we have access to is not aligned. And this really helps to explain that why in the first few weeks of the crisis of the current COVID-19 pandemic, that we're all paying attention to the latest press briefing and looking to the media, but also looking within our organizations for answers. And even if the answers we get are not always good or positive for us or our businesses, it still helps to alleviate some of the anxiety that we experience in relation to that uncertainty. And if anything, it helps us to flag up the need to explore alternatives. So when uncertainty is high, it's also the case that entrepreneurs are prone to making decisions on the basis of intuition, so their gut instinct, but also on emotions and what we refer to as heuristics or mental shortcuts or rules of thumb. But these are not necessarily the best or most helpful strategies to evoke. And so what is the problem exactly that we're dealing with? Is it that because of the current COVID-19 crisis, and due to social distancing, that our capacity has been reduced and our desired sales doesn't meet up with our actual sales? And so that's the problem. And then in the second stage, it would be all about, well, what are the different courses of action or possible solutions that we could put into place to resolve that problem? And it's at this stage where entrepreneurs really need to engage in creative brainstorming. So they need to be thinking about all of the different alternatives. And what your mind will want to do is to rush to judgment quickly. Your mind will want to come up with a solution very quickly, or other people might pressure you to do so. So these are the kinds of decisions you have to make over several sittings. And I think that's important. And in the third stage, you would need to be thinking about, well, what are your main objectives generally? Like, what are you trying to accomplish in your business over the next few months or the next year, and to articulate those. And fourthly, you need to be thinking about how the different courses of action that you come up with in stage 2, and hopefully within that, there's an optimal course of action you can follow, how that course of action will help you to address the problem at hand and to meet the desired objectives and goals. So these are just some of the strategies that entrepreneurs can use to make better decisions in a context of uncertainty. So I think one of the first things that we can all do as individuals, but entrepreneurs can do more especially, is that we can step back and take stock. So we can reflect on protective factors, and we can think about how can we build up additional resources for ourselves at this time. And I think this will enable people to better cope. And protective factors are really those strengths, those assets, those resources that serve to buffer against adversity and to mitigate the risks involved. They're especially important because it can, from an entrepreneurial perspective, increase one's alertness to new opportunities. It can enhance creative thinking, and it can enhance people's access to more strategies within their repertoire, and it can also attract resources to individuals and businesses. So I think eliciting these kinds of positive emotions are important, and I think people are experiencing, to an extent, a sense of hope around what's coming next. So we all hope that infection rates will go down and life will return to normal. And some entrepreneurs are experiencing a sense of excitement in relation to how they can maybe diversify their offering or pivot or create new businesses. And there are several different strategies we can use to elicit and harness these positive emotions. So psychologists talk about benefit finding. So for instance, if we think about the current pandemic, we can imagine, even though there are a lot of negatives, is there anything positive that's come out of this? Can you see any value for you as an individual or your business in relation to how you work, or the nature of work that you engage in, or the kinds of opportunities that you might want to pursue. So that's benefit finding. And benefit reminding is also stepping back and reflecting and thinking about the positives you already have. So why did you become an entrepreneur in the first place? What are the benefits, the perks in relation to such? Or the benefits, reminding yourself of all the support that you've received from your team, from external parties, and all of the support maybe you've given to other people. So that's benefit reminding. And then there's also using humor. And I think humor is incredibly important and another way to elicit positive emotions. So this is about seeing what's funny about something, making light of the issues or the situation. So not about the pandemic per se, because of course there are a lot of negatives, but maybe just in the little daily interactions or things that are going on. Like for instance, I was in the kitchen the other day with my partner and we were having lunch and I was slicing a cooked ham. And instead of saying he thought the ham was delicious, he said the ham was approachable. So he found it was approachable. And I thought in an era of social distancing, that's quite a funny way to describe food. Maybe we've been isolating for too long now. So, and this kind of amused me for the rest of the day. So I think hanging on to these little things can be quite important.
Businesses reflect their leadership teams. And fundamentally in a small business, that probably means they reflect their founder and their CEO. So, being completely honest, like every deficiency I see in the business, I tend to see in my own character. And, in fairness, every strength I see in the business, I see a little bit of myself in there as well. So, sort of a mutual benefit and burden there. But I think that the key thing is that if you're doing well as a business, you're going to create certain deficiencies. Certain managers are fantastic managing 10 people. They've got to manage 30 people. That might not be their bag, but you only find that out through success. So I think there's sort of got to be a natural mindset within the business that we are going to come across deficiencies. We are going to come across pinch points. Our own successes might create new risks in their turn. The problem is when you hide from those new risks. The problem is when you've actually discovered that someone might need upskilling, or actually they might have moved into a role that doesn't suit their skill set, that's not in their sweet spot. It's not dealing with it, it's kicking the can down the road. And I would say that was certainly one of my biggest failings was there were deficiencies I saw in the good times. It'd be naive to believe that those deficiencies will correct themselves in the challenging times.
And I also want to talk a little bit more about a few other strategies that people can implement. So another is creating a no blame culture. A no blame culture. So this is about encouraging people within your organization to report mistakes or to report potential problems. So it's not about telling on other individuals. It's not about people per se. It's about systems and processes and what has gone wrong and what might go wrong. And how you can create this kind of culture is to meet up frequently with your team. You can keep the lines of communication open. And when you're having these meetings, you can discuss not only what those concerns might be, but how you can respond to such and who is responsible for that. So while not all companies have the resources necessarily in place to devise these risk-related exercises or to implement sophisticated crisis plans in advance, or even to prepare crisis management teams, every organization can create this kind of culture. And it's achievable from the outset, from when the business is first created, or even from today. So yes, in some ways, small businesses are more vulnerable. And if you're a business of one, then that is in part your vulnerability, that something happens to you, then is the business able to continue? And I think especially in these times, it's important for individuals like that to maybe reach out and see who else is around doing complementary things, and can you combine forces, at least for a period of time. But I think also there are strengths in being small. So we just had news yesterday in the UK of Boots and John Lewis, a big department store, of them closing down a number of shops and making a number of people redundant across the country. So these larger businesses, can be more at risk in many ways, depending on the sector that they're operating with. Also, Boots had a number of issues sort of going into the crisis as well. But also another thing that makes small businesses perhaps stronger and less vulnerable to a crisis is that they can move, they can change, they can pivot more quickly. They can be more flexible than larger organizations. And because they're less hierarchical in nature, this enables them to be that way. So I think this kind of flexibility is afforded much more in the case of smaller businesses than larger businesses. So I think that's one thing I would mention. I don't know, Ben, if you want to add to that?
I feel one of the privileges that I have and our business has is that we speak to hundreds of business every single week. And I would say like it kind of falls into three categories. A business of 30 people and below, they've shown to be really, really agile, like the ability to sort of like downsize, to control costs, has been a lot faster than big organizations. And also they have the confidence that when they make a decision to come back to an office or start expenditure again, they can make it quickly and action it within 2 weeks. So I think there are certain advantages for businesses of that size, just how quickly you can move, how quickly you can reduce, how quickly you can grow again. At the other extreme, we found some of our corporate clients, they have an advantage that they typically like have larger cash balances, larger access to funds. So whilst they may be slower in making plans, there isn't perhaps the mass panic about, what's the future of the business going to look like. Perhaps redundancies are inevitable, but so on and so, like they've got the cash to deal with it. I feel really for the businesses between say 50 and 250 people. That's where I almost feel like they can't be agile enough to just really reduce costs, but they don't have as much just free cash and capital to invest in marketing or changing their space or enhancing the training for their staff. And it can be quite a crippling period for businesses of there, just that sense of we want to act but we can't at both ends. So I would say it's different for different sized businesses and like it's challenging for all, but I feel the SMEs about 50 to 200 people, it's a real challenge at this time. Switching to remote working for me has been like an amazing experiment and an amazing learning curve for realizing, oh no, I won't just stay at home and watch Netflix and eat pizza all day. And likewise, that's not what the staff do either. So the switch, what was good for us was it was very seamless from a technology point of view. Like as a business, we'd invested quite heavily in cloud-based platforms, in IT, we've got a good IT team. So everyone sort of instantly was up and running. So that piece was great. There wasn't the tension that I know some businesses struggled with as to, do we have the right platforms for this? Should we be using Zoom? Should we be using Teams? So on and so forth. We just hit it. But then what instantly hit us was actually we can be incredibly efficient at probably 60-70% of activities remotely. We can be just as efficient. Where it starts to fall down is on the creativity, on the collaboration, on the strategy, where you're really focusing on sort of trying to drive the business forward. So the day-to-day wasn't impacted. I think the strategy was. I think also, whilst I'm not saying a pandemic's good or a long period away from the office is good, I think the duration of it has been really good, because in the first 4 to 5 weeks, I think if you surveyed 80-90% of people, they were like, this is great. Like I can work from home. I'm enjoying not having the commute. I can be just as effective. But slowly as time's gone on, people have come to realize actually balance is what I need.
So crises can be viewed as situations that, while difficult and even devastating at times, also provide opportunities for organizations to demonstrate flexibility, to essentially to change the way that things are done within the business. So flexibility around the focus of the organization in terms of the business offer, so what you provide in terms of products or services, to flexibility to change the way things are done in relation to operations and how they're configured. Also flexibility in terms of thinking about the strategy and how the strategy might be repositioned or realigned. And also it's an opportunity to change the way that things are done in terms of the current configuration of how business teams function, as well as different departments. Changes in work patterns and work behaviors that are designed to reflect values still, to enable people to achieve their shared values, their common sense of purpose, are more likely to be engaged in, that people are more likely to be on board with those changes when those changes, again, reflect those values. And it's also the case, and you touched on this a little bit as well, that people are more likely to engage with work and changes to their work in times of crisis or otherwise when they perceive that the expressed values within an organization from people like yourself, Ben, and actual values are one and the same. So when the expressed values, the professed values, and the practice values are the same, then that's important. And people tend to be more committed to their organizations. They tend to engage more in cooperative behaviors. They tend to have a higher degree of trust in their organization and to be more productive. When they perceive, however, there to be a values gap, So an organization says, oh yeah, well, we really promote, we embrace benevolence and caring, but their actions during the crisis or otherwise suggest something opposite to that, then people have a problem with that and they're less likely to engage and be on board with those changes.
Yes. And it's funny, even I would say in a crisis, it's been hard sometimes. Like you're so laser focused on the problem at hand, or maybe the potential problem at hand, that it's almost a bit like when everyone was stockpiling at the start, and they'd go to the supermarket, and all of a sudden you had people in their 30s pushing grandmas out the way, this behavior that they never thought they would have. Right. I think there's almost like, for the management team, the CEO, almost, you've got this laser focus on the problem, and you're pushing everything away that you used to really value. So funny, if at my desk, I've got a big post-it note, like, remember the values. Right there, sort of the first post-it note on my right-hand side, so that as I'm responding to emails or thinking or strategizing, it's there to sort of point me back to them. Being committed to sustainability is something everyone in the business can touch. It's something everyone in the business can influence on a day-to-day basis. And also, when you are looking for ways in which to be more sustainable, it's open to everyone in the business. Like I say, our committee there's no hierarchy, because you've got junior members of staff and some of the most senior members of staff sitting on a committee, contributing and discussing the same topics. And I think what it really does for an organization is it creates that culture of openness and togetherness, and also a culture in which you can share ideas. So I kind of see it as almost like good key stage 1 skills, that actually, if you've got a culture of sustainability and you've got a commitment to it, what will naturally flow from that is a better culture of communication and togetherness within the organization, and that will make you more robust in dealing with crisis. So I think there's like an intrinsicness that comes from that, but I think also the more you express it, the more committed people will come. We founded the business in the last recession, so we were sort of born out of a crisis, and so naturally, at that period of time, you sort of think you develop resolve, and there's loads of case studies of good resilience and poor resilience from competitors and other just companies in industry. So I think what we had was a really good base case, that we always believed in keeping good cash reserves in the business. And I've always sort of taken the view, you've got to have 3 months of cash to identify a problem, 6 months of cash to rectify a problem, and an additional 3 months of cash of grace. So we've always had that year's sort of like view of like cash is there to sort of help the resilience of the business, that you need to react. And I think we had a good baseline of culture, that we knew we had people who were committed to the cause and would come with us, and great client relationships. But what we had to quickly do was have a real openness to change, which was we had to change even the management structure and the leadership structure in the organization. We had certain individuals who had good resolve for this type of crisis and the right way of dealing with things and communicating with people, and others who weren't. So we quickly adjusted and adapted and changed that and made that clear. So the leadership teams knew who to go to for what. We worked incredibly hard on clarity of communication, really making messages simple for the other leaders within the business, like saying, look, here's the 3 key metrics that we need you to focus on and deliver, and that will make this company resilient, and this will give us what we need. But also, really touching on your point there, was within that, it gave them the confidence to make change, because we could be so clear about what we needed and what we didn't need. Actually, that created the perfect pocket for them to have the autonomy to act and the autonomy to drive change within their teams and their departments and on their P&Ls to deliver performance.
A great piece of advice someone gave me was be cerebral in your planning and empathetic in your execution. And I think that's the right way to be, that you have to, as a leader, get yourself in the mindset that my task is to get the best possible outcome for the organization and the individual. And I need to start with the organization, and then I need to move on to the individual, and then align those 2 things together. And one of the things I say in Third Way to all the staff, if we have staff who want to come and do a particular training or a particular piece of development that requires investment, my answer is always, if it's good for the business and good for you, the answer will always be yes. If it's good for the business and bad for you, my answer should be no. And if it's good for you but bad for the business, my answer is definitely no. And that's how sort of try and rationalize that empathy and that decision making. And I think sorry, I'm going on a bit, Rachel. I think empathy, I always feel like a good business leader is someone who's a B plus at almost everything and an A at a couple of things. And empathy for me is like one of the firm sort of B plus boxes that you need as a leader. It's a tool that you need to understand. You need to understand the power of it, but you also need to understand that power can be crippling as well. That if it's stopping you from making key decisions, particularly in a crisis, because you're trying to perhaps protect one individual, you might harm 100 individuals. So you have to know how to deploy it, and you also have to be brave with yourself about when to park it and how to use it.
Looking at meta-analyses on mental health in the workplace, these meta-analyses have shown that mental health or poor mental health, declining mental health, is linked to job strain, is linked to low decision-making latitude, is linked to high efforts but low rewards, is also linked to job insecurity and also workplace incivility. So workplace incivility tends to deal with issues relating to rudeness at work, harassment, bullying, and so on. So all of these things in turn can lead to psychological distress, to depression, and in some cases to burnout. But also for the organization, it can lead to high levels of employee absenteeism. It can lead to low levels of productivity. It can lead to low levels of employee commitment and also to job satisfaction. So mental health at work affects not only individuals, but it also affects the organization as a whole. Another thing that organizations can do is they can nominate a mental health champion or champions at work. So these are individuals who create awareness at work around mental health, who are knowledgeable about changing regulations and guidelines as it relates to mental health, and also provide peer support to their colleagues.
I can process quite a lot of information very quickly and know where we should direct the team or the company. So for me, whenever I feel like I'm not processing a piece of information well, it's usually a sign for me that mentally I'm a bit exhausted and I need to go and take a break. Often much to the frustration of my management team, like, can you just like make a decision? Like, actually, it's better if I take a break, wait a day, and make a good decision as opposed to rush to one. So that's sort of a personal piece. I feel like as we've been talking today, I've really felt like a common thread with the webinars we did on sustainability and resilience. And you sort of, I've begin to almost like form in my mind that like thinking about mental health should be part of the DNA of the business. In the same way your core values should be the DNA, and sustainability should be in the DNA, resilience should be in the DNA, awareness of mental health should be in the DNA. And then a lot of the other things we've talked about, like with empathy and with just general sort of behavior, that's almost like the soul of the organization. You know, the way that you act and the way you treat people and sort of what you feel good looks like. And I just think like that's just something to remember about sort of mental health issues in the workplace, like really embed it in the DNA and then really have like the soul for caring for people as they come and raise those issues with you.
Thanks very much. And I think that's all we have time for today. So thanks everyone for your questions and for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care and goodbye.
Bye everyone.